Welcome everybody to the Endgame guide on how to build your Chris Vector, or should I say, the Icy Rain. So without further ado, let's get right into it. So let's take a look at the weapon features real quick, right? So as you can see, in the first feature it says that crit hits grants a 40% chance to trigger Frost Vortex, right? And then when Frost Vortex is created, auto reload 15% of your bullets. And the last feature would be that you have +1 Frost Vortex. Now, what is Frost Vortex real quick, right? So if you just take a look at the tooltip here, it is continuous damage, a debuff, and it is AoE, right? It inflicts 30% PSI intensity status damage per second for 4 seconds, and up to 2 Frost Vortexes may exist at any time. Now, for this gun, it's going to be 3, if without, well, the specific mod used, right? However, just by default, for this gun, it's going to be 3, right? So the additional damage is Frost Element, cannot crit, cannot strike weak spots, and will not decay with distance. And here is the kind of wrong damage formula for it. It's really brief, it misses some information, but that's what the game gives us, right? So what is the special mechanic about this gun? Pretty much every time you create a Frost Vortex, it'll auto reload 15% of your bullets, right? And so since the limit for this gun is 3 Frost Vortex, if you ever happen to trigger a 4th one, the first one is going to disappear, right? So it's not like something where once you have 3 Frost Vortexes, you cannot trigger a next one. No, it doesn't work like that. You can just literally you'll be recycling your Frost Vortexes, right? Now, for the reload mechanic, this 15% auto reload depends on your max bullets that you can have. So it can be influenced by your calibration blueprints and by your mods. So, I will dive into the minimal crit rate pretty much that you will need to keep feeding this gun bullets without ever having to reload. But for now, let's go to the calibration attributes. So, you have pretty much 2 options, right? The one that you'd rock if you want more damage would be Assault Style with double crit rate. However, the second option would be Heavy Style, right, with double crit rate as well. The difference really is that with Assault Style, you'll have to compensate your magazine capacity and your accuracy with your mods and with your accessories. Whereas for your heavy calibrations, you could go for... Actually, you wouldn't even need to go for reload speed, right? Because you have so much ammo, you'll just keep recycling. You'll just keep refeeding and feeding bullets into your gun, right? However, you're gonna do less damage on average, so less DPS with the heavy. So really heavy, you'd go for it if you don't really feel safe about hitting your shots, right? And Assault Style is, if you can hit your shot, man, just go for it. You're gonna do more damage. Now, to compensate your accuracy, right, and your magazine capacity, let's go take a look at the gun attachments real quick. So, for your gun accessories, what do you want to be running? For the muzzle, I am currently running the integrated compensator since it buffs at least 2 things, right? It buffs the accuracy and the stability. Now, yeah, you can opt for the small break for, a bit more accuracy at the expense of stability, or the tactical flash hider for a bit more stability, but at the cost of accuracy, right? So really, it depends on what you're comfortable with and what school of thought you're going for, right? So the 2 schools of thought here is, are you going to aim down sight, so ADS, or are you going to shoot over the shoulder, so OTS, right? Pretty much, if you are going to be shooting OTS, you would want accuracy, because OTS, as you can see here, this is OTS. It's not really that good of like accuracy right now, right? Whereas like ADS pretty much, it's the accuracy is gonna be locked at almost 100%. Now here there's a there's a lot of recoil, but pretty much this is the uncontrolled pattern, right? So pretty much if we go back to the accessories, these are gonna be your choices for the muzzle. Now, the optic, I'm currently running the tactical holographic sight, really just because it looks good, and it's an alternative to the compact reflex sight, although it does have less stability, right? You can also opt for the sealed reflex sight for a bit more, stability, So that's pretty much it for the optic choices. Moving on to tactics, I'm currently running the Cobra grip, right? But you can definitely, so pretty much the first four are going to be your options, right? It's once again, it's following the schools of thought idea where do you want more stability or accuracy, right? And obviously for there's two for each, right? There's two for the stability, there's two for the accuracy. Well, you should obviously go for the better one, although for instance, the light front grip is going to cost you stellar planula, which me personally, I'm not ready to spend, right? And of course, we're using a salt style calibration, so we will need to compensate that with a weighted SMG mag, right? And as a matter of fact, for heavy style, you should also go for the weighted SMG mag for more bullet count. So let's move on to the gear set, right? So your set bonuses and your key gear. Now, first off, for the key gear, it's going to be the Frost Tactical Vest. So as you can see, Frost Vortex generates ice spikes that deal frost damage of 100% intensity. That is going to be the best in slot for the Icy Rain. And the reason for that is because, so as you can see, the Icy Rain shoots really fast. And every time you crit, it's going to grant you 40% chance to trigger Frost Vortex, right? So you will be constantly pretty much just triggering Frost Vortex at one after the other, right? So you will be able to proc this a lot of times and really quickly. So this is why this is the best in slot. Now, for your gear. I am currently running 3-piece Lone Wolf and 2-piece Shelter, right? Now, Lone Wolf, since we are going to be stacking a lot of crit on this gun, you are going to gain a lot from the crit damage bonus that this can give. And also, we're running Shelter 2-piece for the elemental damage, right? You could really, if you don't have Shelter, you can definitely go for something like Bastille and something else. Anything with that gives a good buff on its 1-piece, right? But here, we're going to be running this. And pretty much the reason for 3-piece Lone Wolf instead of a 3-piece Shelter from my testing is really just because the gun shoots so fast. Most of your damage is going to come pretty much from your, well, normal weapon bullet damage, right? It's not really going to come from your Frost Vortex, although it's still going to be like a big part of your damage. It's not going to be most, right? So this is why we're going 3-piece Lone Wolf. Now, for your substats priority, you're going to be looking for crit damage, status damage / elemental damage. Well, status damage and elemental damage, as I've said in my previous weapon guides, is the same thing. And weapon damage, right? Also, you can definitely get damage against X type of enemy. That's going to help you, right? And you should also go for magazine capacity. Since, well, as I've explained earlier, the 15% auto reload depends on your maximum bullet count. It doesn't depend on the default 40 ammo count, right? And as a matter of fact, if you don't even have enough bullets, like sub 40 bullets, you're actually really gonna need magazine capacity because it's not gonna reload enough bullet for you to keep feeding your gun and never reload, right? And well, if you get reload speed, it's really cope. It's really like if you don't hit your shots, right, at some point you're gonna run out of bullets. So it can be like slightly good. Now, let's take a look at the crit rate requirement to never run out of bullets. So the way to do this is it's really simple math, right? So like I said, the 15% auto reload depends on your max mag capacity, right? So what you're gonna do here is pretty much so for instance, say here, I have a full mag capacity of 45, right? What this means is that I'm gonna have to do 0.15 times my max ammo capacity, so 45. So we do 0.15 times 45. It's gonna give us this number, so it's gonna give us 6.75, which is equal to the amount of ammo refilled per Frost Vortex trigger. So if I do a life test here, so 39, right? 38, 37, 36, 35, 34, 33, 32, 31, 30, and 6. So I was at 30 bullets. I just got refilled to 6. Now, the kind of bad thing about this is that the game doesn't round the number to the highest. It rounds it to the lowest, which is why I only refill 6, right? So if we do it again, 33, 32, 31, 30, 36. So yeah. Now that I know that I'm gonna get 6 ammo refilled per Frost Vortex trigger, I'm gonna have to know the crit rate needed, right? So the formula for this would be 1 divided by the 6 that I just found. It's gonna give me 0.12666 blah blah blah, and I do this number divided by 0.4, which is the trigger chance every time you crit. That's gonna give me 42%. So the crit rate that I'm gonna need pretty much to keep my bullets high would be around 42%. Now currently I am slightly low. I'm slightly shy of the number, right? I am currently sitting at 39.1%, but 42 is going to be what I'm going to be looking for. And obviously in a realistic scenario, you're also going to miss some shots, right? So you can actually you should actually even go a bit higher than that 42%. Well, for me, right, it's going to be 42. So you should still go a bit higher than the crit rate that you calculate. Now that we've got this dealt with, let's go take a look at our secondary weapon and our melee weapon. So secondary, with this build that I'm going to show, right, it's going to be preferable to use the recurve crossbow because the crit rate is going to be really important to up your icy rain damage, and it's also going to give the bullseye effect, right? Now, if you can kind of also consider the wildfire, if I have it here, is this? Yeah. So you can also consider the wildfire, right, for its buff. However, from my testing, it's done less damage, and it really doesn't give crit rate for your Frost Vortex trigger chance. So I found this to be worse. So, crossbow, right? You run the crossbow, and for the melee weapon, you should run the long axe, because as we can see here, heavy attacks activate Fortress Warfare up to once every 10 seconds. And heavy attacks grant crit rate, which is really important. Now, the special thing about this is, say here I do a heavy attack. It's gonna spawn the Fortress Warfare buff. And the neat thing is that it also tells me the cooldown. But however, I did not get any crit rate buff. So how does this weapon work? Really, you just have to hit enemies with that heavy attack, right? So here, if I do a heavy attack, I'm gonna hit all 3. And as you can see, I got 3 stacks at the bottom left. Well, at the bottom side of my screen, a bit to the left of my health bar, you'll see 3 axe stack. And what is this? Crit rate and melee speed double. Whatever. It's the crit rate buff, right? So this is what you're going to be running. Now in the DPS showcase, I just straight up didn't show the axe, but just know that the axe is something you can run for even more damage. And now let's move on to your mods. So for the head mod, you've pretty much kind of got 3 choices, right? You have Deviation Expert, you have Faithful Strike, and Momentum Up. Now, pretty much the best one is going to be Deviation Expert. It gives you fire rate plus 10% and status damage plus 20% permanently. And then the second one, you could go for Faithful Strike, right? Because it gives you the crit rate that you need, and it's also going to buff your crit damage. And then you've got Momentum Up, right? So Momentum Up would be your third choice. Now, do keep in mind that there is a little caveat in the performance of these mods, right? Because, like I've said in my previous different weapon guides, substats rule in this game, right? They are very important. So for instance, if you have a Faithful Strike that has like perfect substats, and you've got a Deviation Expert that has like, I don't know, 2 defensive substats, and then it rolls all into the defensive substats, right? It should be high time to consider your Faithful Strike. So yeah. So that was your head mod. I'll be running my Deviation Expert. And now, moving on to the mask. Here, since we are running the crossbow, we will be running this thing, Targeted Strike. Now, it's very unfortunate that I got it on precision, right? Ideally, you wouldn't have it on precision. You'd have it on either, you say talent or violent, right? But here, it is what it is. Actually, in the DPS showcase, even I think I did it. Yeah, I did it with this mod, not even upgraded. So I should be actually hitting even harder. And pretty much, this is what you're going to be going for. Now, sure, if you don't run the crossbow, you can definitely take the Lingering Frost, right? And the Obliteration talent. This one is gonna make your Frost Vortex final damage be increased the more enemies you are dealing with, so more AoE based. And this one, it's more of a like the longer duration of your Frost Vortex, the higher its final damage, right? However, you're kind of like getting less of the buff from it because your vector just triggers Frost Vortex so often, right? So you're kind of wasting a small part of this mod. Now, you can also consider the Fortress Warfare runs, right? However, they are pretty much Walmart versions of the Bullseye ones, since they give kind of less of a buff for you, right? Now, moving on to the gloves, you have two choices, right? You've got Crit Amp and you've got Crit Boost. Now, from my testing, I've got at least like more than 10 samples, right, of DPS testing with still here, because I have pretty much the same mod, right? This is Crit Boost with 15% crit rate, 6% crit damage, and that's pretty much all it has for, well, my dummy DPS test. And then I've also got a Crit Amp that also has only 6% crit damage. It does give slightly more magazine capacity, but that's not really gonna affect my DPS, right? And really, this mod just straight up performs better, so you should go for Crit Boost. However, once again, it's gonna depend on your substats. Moving on to the boots. For every single weapon that you're going to play in this game, pretty much, it's almost going to be covered advance, and this gun is no exception. So go for covered advance for your boot mods. Now, for the top mod, really, it's really dependent on your substats, right? So I've done tests with my munitions amplifier, with my flame resonance, with, well, my crit damage enhancement. And even though crit damage enhancement, like, it's what you need, here it actually deals less damage than my munitions amplifier, to the very least on the dummy test. And that is because, well, if you take a look at this, right, it's got 2 blue substats, whereas here it's got 1 blue and 1 green, and here it's got 1 green and 1 gray, and the gray one doesn't even count, right? So here, for you, just take whatever that has the best substats. So for me, it's going to be munitions amplifier. Moving on to the pants mod, you're pretty much going to have 2 options here, right? It's either going to be Deadshot Violent or Bullet Siphon, right? Now, here, from my testing, these 2 mods, they perform pretty closely, right? Because the reason for that is here, Bullet Siphon, it's going to affect your bullet damage even if it doesn't crit. However, you have to stack it, whereas here, it's only going to affect your crit damage, right? But it stacks really quickly with that fire rate, right? So really, just you're going to have to choose between these 2 and take whichever that's going to perform better for you. So you're going to have to test it yourself. And then let's take a look at the gun mod. Now, for your gun mods, you're going to have 2 choices, right? You can choose between the Vortex Multiplier, which, well, increases the max amount of Frost Vortexes for you by 1 and increases your Frost Vortex damage by 10%. Or you can choose you can choose the Cryoblast, which here, now your Frost Vortex applies Frostbite, and when it's active, plus 4% vulnerability and minus 10% movement speed. So it's going to also have a kind of like a crowd control effect to it. Now, I've found, well, to the very least, when I was testing both mods, right, and they had equivalent substats, well, Vortex Multiplier performed better than my Cryoblast, right? So I'll be favoring Vortex Multiplier, but really, like, once again, it's gonna depend on your substats, as always, really. All right, now that we've taken care of this, let's take a look at the Cradle. So if I go in my Cradle, pretty much the ones that you're gonna need to run is Automatic Weapon Enhancement, Deviation Master for PvE content. You can definitely run Master Tactician for Great One's damage bonus, right? If you use, well, a tactical item like grenades or daggers, whatever. You're going to need Tactical Combo. Well, need as I say this because it says that weapon damage was 25% after switching weapons or reloading, right? And it's exactly the fact that you're going to be switching between and reloading your crossbow, but you'll be switching between your crossbow and your SMG. So really, this can have its use. Or even if you don't use anything else, right? Even if you only want to shoot with your vector, all you can do is just, you're shooting, right? And then just 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 like that, you've gotten the buff, 25% weapon damage. So that's it for that. And then you're gonna also run status enhancement because it's gonna give you your frost vortex a 25% buff right after you hit a weak spot. Then you definitely want to run sustained suppression because this is the specific buff for frost vortex, right? And now, since I will be running the crossbow, I will gain a lot, and I mean that, from the bounty hunter and from steady hands, right? And steady hands actually, since I'm also running the long axe, I'm also going to gain weak spot damage plus 40% for my normal bullets. And I'm also going to gain weak spot damage to the bullseye, right? And here, I'll also gain weapon damage plus 25% and weak spot damage plus 35% after defeating an enemy that I've marked with my crossbow. So these are pretty much going to be the Cradle that you will want to run. Now, if you might have noticed, you are actually going to have one where you can just choose randomly. Well, one, if you remove the Master Tactician, right? So you can definitely go, if you're clearing more harder content, right? If you have difficulty surviving, you can choose, for instance, Rapid Aid or Agility, anything really. But that is pretty much going to wrap it up for the Cradle. And now let's take a look at the food buffs that you can use. So, what are the food buffs that you can use? Now for the drinks, instantly it's a whimsical drink, 25% status damage bonus. There is nothing else in the drinks that can pretty much buff buff you like that. And as a matter of fact, I believe there is no other drinks that can buff your damage except maybe Stardust Raspberry. Yes, so Stardust Raspberry increases your continuous debuff effect duration by 20%. However, for this gun, it's pretty much useless, because you'll be recycling your frost vortexes, so they won't even last long enough to make use of this, right? So pretty much it's gonna be whimsical drink that you'll be running. Now for the food buff, once again, it's a straight up answer: honey glazed meat. It literally gives you 15% crit rate, which is what you need when hitting enemies affected by frost vortex, right? Now sure, there are other Walmart buffs for that, right? So you can take assorted canned fruits, which gives you more weak spot damage. You can take bone and deviant sausage for boss damage. You can pretty much do, I believe, mixed fried hot dogs. Yeah, so mixed fried hot dog when the enemy is affected by bullseye. So you've got all these small other buffs that you can use, but the best in slot would be honey glazed meat right here. So yeah, like and subscribe if you'd like to see more Once Human content from me, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye and take care.